it would really be good this morning if we could talk about something, whatever, that is really important to us, vital to us, that we want to listen and look into together. And not just the topic being important to us. It's always wonderful if there's a good question or a good topic that is so common, a situation or problem for us human beings, so we can share in the looking, in the intensity or the urge of interest. But also that the looking and listening itself is of a different kind than our normal looking and listening, in which we're so tied to the words and imagination, and therefore can very superficially touch and go on things that may concern us deeper than superficial. Since there are some people who may not have been here before, I may be wrong, let us first quickly say that the talk is not given as a lecture for information to be accumulated. It is there. It is a time for us to listen and look and question together. Not take Toni's words for the truth or for whatever, but wonder what it is that they are all about. The words may be difficult to comprehend because one hasn't gotten the same associations maybe with the words that are used. But they're not used flippantly or just out of sheer habit. They point to something. They indicate something. They refer to something that is real. Real meaning not just thought about, but actually happening in ourselves, and observable, detectable, whatever word you wish to use to describe the process, it doesn't matter. So the question that often comes up with someone who comes here new is, what are you doing here? Sometimes people who come as a guest or volunteer ask people on staff, what are you doing here? Are you still asking yourself that? What are you doing here? Or what are we supposed to do here? Can we find out what we're doing? From moment to moment? Not just the answer given, we're doing this or that, meditative inquiry, retreats, sitting, talking, watching movies. But what are we doing this instant? What is happening this instant? Without a planned response, just right there to cover it, to cover the question. What is happening this instant, inside and outside? not answering from knowing what happened in the past, or what one knows about weather or wind or sunshine, but looking and listening in the quietness of this large room, in a much, much larger valley, much, much larger universe. Not ideally what should be happening right now. This is how we think and look in accordance to what should be happening. And we may not be aware of that we look that way. We may think we're very realistic, we're seeing what's going on, but we may find out if we question it that we see according to what we want to see, and we hear according to what we want to hear. And therefore are not in touch with what's really happening within ourselves, our thought processes, the emotions, the sensations, feelings, our perceptions of each other, or the person we're talking to, or in whose presence we are, is approving of us or not. We want to find out whether we are being approved of, and therefore we can perceive the person. And can there be awareness of these wantings, these fears, these preconceived ideas about ourselves and each other? A growing awareness, and therefore a growing discovery of this massive enclosure of assumptions and prejudices, ideas we have of ourselves and each other, and of the nature around us. Keeping the perception, the seeing, the hearing cramped, distorted, not open and relaxed and receptive to what's actually there. This is what we're wondering, whether it can happen in human beings alone or together entering into a silent room for a period of silence. To hear wind without idea of wind, fear of wind, or just watch in listening, looking, feeling the warmth of the sun. This incredible sound, one can't describe it. Thoughts and words can't describe all of that. Either what's going on within us or what is happening around us in the woods, under the sky, in the sunlight, walking across a squishy, soggy meadow. Words can't describe it, and yet it can take place in its wholeness, in its entirety. We were just walking this morning up the hill to the pond and around the pond. Pond is a word, and it evokes an image, doesn't it, if one has been up the hill and remembers what is called a pond. And yet, in looking at it, without the word pond. And right now talking, there'll be more words describing what memory produces to look at, the multiple ripples, little wavelets all over the surface of the water, each one reflecting, as it were, the sky. Gray, blue, dark, light on each little ripple. And looking up into the sky, there's the whole thing, not reflected, it's just there. And there's the pond with all the ripples. Millions of little clouds with their shadows. How does one see that? How does one listen? How do we look at each other? How do we look at ourselves, listen to ourselves? The constant stream of verbalizations, thoughts, images, memories. You may say, I can't look at that at all. It's just either being awash in it all, or then an instant, a brief instant of waking up. That this is what has been going on, a washness in floods of thoughts with all their connected feelings, sensations, emotions. So at an instant of waking up from that, what is there? What happens? The instant of coming to the fact that there has been complete awashness, caught upness in thoughts and feelings and emotions, and the moment of coming to. Is it quiet for a moment? No wind? No wanting what is seen to have been there or what is seen to be there, no wanting for it to be different. No wanting. No discontent over what is or was, or is there immediately discontent? Wanting thought to stop. More clarity, more of this moment of attention. More wind or less wind. More sun or less wind or less sun. More snow to make the trees look pretty. Less fear, less wanting, less anger. Is that what is going on? Wanting this minute of coming to? Or is there an instant of complete silence and not knowing what is next? Albeit the wanting wants to surface, and that one can notice that. And maybe the next moment, awash in wanting, in the midst of sunshine. And clouds. sometimes people say, well, there are moments in which there is a wakefulness and there is hearing the wind and feeling the warmth and brightness of the sun, but so what? Do we see what that indicates? For a moment, not awash in memories and thoughts and anticipations of the future, but an instant of sunshine felt on the skin, the brightness on the eyes, sound of wind flapping the plastic and rubbing leaves and branches against each other. There's wanting there when we say, so what, isn't there? Wanting something more spectacular. Something more catching. Wanting, which prevents the complete relaxation of here-ness, is-ness. What is-ness? These are all just words. Don't get stuck in them. Don't fight me over them. I'll be willing to use others. So at the moment there, for a moment nothing stirs, and then the want for something different and the reaction. So what is this? This isn't enough. This isn't what I came here for years. Just to hear the wind, or can do that any place. It's much, much more than hearing the wind or feeling the sun or experiencing the breathing, feeling the heartbeat, beating faster at a scary thought. All that is there, but how is it being received? How is it being listened to? What is the state of being in the midst of all of that? Comprehending all of that. Embracing it, as it were, but not as an intentional gesture, a motivated gesture, just as a way of being. We said in the beginning it would be so nice to talk about something that is of deep importance to all of us, and not just talk about it, but plumb it. We don't need to find words. We'll do it. A state of peace is what human beings want to find. Not all. Some human beings want to find a state of war because that's exciting, stimulating, exhilarating. Common cause, the camaraderie coming from that. But a lot of human beings, maybe the same ones after a few years of war, want peace. We want peace from ourselves, from our own inner conflicts, our own inner turmoil, don't we? Peace in relationship with each other, with our children, our husbands, friends, wives. Place at work, we want it to be peaceful, not constant contradiction, contention, fear, aggression, defense, hurt. We want to be free of that. We want to have some state in which there's no conflict. no restlessness or agitation. And yet we're not in peace, inwardly and outwardly. One instant one has said something and somebody got hurt. One instant somebody says something and I'm hurt. And then the machinery getting into motion to plot for defense and revenge. I'm using heavy words, but we're heavy beings. We don't usually walk in lightness, the lightness of no carryover of past problems or conflicts. We're not living peacefully, are we? There's no peace within, is there? Or is there? I'm not saying what's going on in people. I'm looking at what people tell me, looking into magazines, newscasts. And what emerges at first sight and second sight too is no peace in human beings. A cut-upness in multiple, infinite problems, all needing solutions which are difficult or impossible to arrive at because of the way people are, because there's no money. Constantly problems. The war within of conflicting problems. Wanting to have peace with one's children and yet doing and saying things which get them upset or get oneself upset, feeling guilty afterwards when I said something to them. And then they don't like it and then one feels guilty about what one did and said. Endlessly. One person just the other day said, will this never end? Seems to be no end to it. And again, walking this morning there was a puddle in a depression in the path. The water was clear in all the different layers of oak leaves, the different shades of brown, fallen and now covered with water. Clearly visible. A branch broken off from the tree in the path. The branch not bemoaning its separation from the tree, and the tree not bemoaning the loss of a branch. It was just there. Blown off. We picked it up, tossed it into the woods. Probably be there for a while and eventually get soft and soggy and decay. Mushrooms growing, fungus, moss, breaking down as it were, and eventually no longer to be seen. All of it without conflict, without suffering. The leaves in that puddle, in that clear puddle, were not bemoaning their death. They were covered with water and sparkling in colors. Who knows where they will be next year? Maybe no longer the form of leaves. right now, completely wholly there, the water, the grass, the leaves, the branches, the trees without leaves, wind and sky, clouds and stars. What is there divided? What is there in conflict? Or is it a palpable whole movement of aliveness with its inevitable new forms, new leaves in the spring, old leaves detaching, decaying, animals eating each other for food, for their cubs, for the adults. Eventually just bare bones there of a rabbit or a deer. I don't know if animals are suffering or if they're just living and dying in wholeness, not ever separated from the whole of life and death. We project through our capabilities of thinking, we project suffering or fear into a deer that is bouncing around, maybe away from shots. We don't know what they're thinking or if they're thinking. If they can begin, if they have enough brain to think of themselves as a separate entity, with that there will come fear and suffering and grieving and conflict about next year's 3 weeks of hunting. But we've never found that with deer here after the hunting season is over. Maybe even during the hunting season, they come out and graze in the fields just as alert, during as after. But not neurotic looking or psychotic looking, with imagined, remembered, or anticipated fears about their future or past life or lives. So why do we human beings live in so much turmoil and cut-upness, fragmentation? We can say, well, it's because of this and because of that, and also because of this and this and that. And nothing happens. There's no looking taking place, no plumbing and questioning deeply as something is happening. By questioning, we don't mean repeating questions. Who am I, or what is my problem? And repeating it mechanically. But wondering and listening, looking and living in the presence of wondering about our fragmentation, our feeling of separation from each other, from ourselves, and from the natural universe around us. Every once in a while somebody will ask, why do you ask about separation? That's another concept. Sounds philosophical to me. Well, if it is, it's philosophical and conceptual to one and one. There's no feeling of suffering or isolation. And that's fine. It may be covered over, escaped from, or not touched. That may happen, but only oneself can get in touch with what's going on in oneself, in what's happening, and discover the shadows of self-enclosure. deep assumption that there is me, the separate one, me, the entity that has a permanency about it, in contrast to the body renewing itself. We have heard this now many times, that the body renews itself between a few weeks, a year, or 5 years. There's not a single cell that's the same that was before, or very few. But something we feel deeply is permanent, which is me, which I can trace back through memory as far as I can think. Maybe I imagine past lives in which I also existed as an entity, separate from other entities, seeking out people who may tell me what I will be in future lives, as an entity separate from other entities. Can one question this assumption? The truthfulness, the validity of it, the actuality of it? As a concept that's actual, has profound impact on our perceptions, our relationship, our whole functioning in fear and want. Tremendous impact from this concept of me, identified with this body here. This body is me, we feel, because it's not you. But one can question what is here. There's a body here, if we use that word, but better just to feel what is there. There's warmth there, and beating of the heart, feeling of circulation of whatever is energy or blood, breathing, maybe a full stomach, maybe an empty stomach, or something in between. Sounds, sights, emotions of fear or anger, contentment or discontent. All of it, if there's careful looking and listening, somehow or other related with memory, verbal memory or non-verbal memory, about me that was, me that is, me that will be, and all my experiences remembered, recorded and remembered, and available. Not all of them, some of them so deeply repressed they're not available immediately. But many memories available to looking at, but often not realizing it's memory that one is looking at. Nothing real. Only the reality of an image produced in some kind of a form in the brain. That says, me, mine, and elicits fear and wanting throughout the body and in our relationship with each other. Fear of being discriminated against as a Jew or an Arab, an Iraqi or a Saudi or an American. Or pride in being identified as that. Pride into death, to die for this image of what I am and what my people are. See, at first it seems so innocuous. Well, so what? What's wrong with having an image of myself as being this body? Well, a body image is a very natural and healthful thing in our functioning, to have a body image which is as accurate as possible. But the brain doesn't remain with just creating body images. There's the image of me being that body. As though there was a separate proprietor of this body. And not just a separate proprietor of this body, but someone who also is a good student or a poor student, a therapist or a patient, a painter or an engineer. Doctor or a worker, and with these ideas of what one is, feelings of pride or humiliation, comparison, envy, jealousy. I was just reading the other day in a book, it was written by Vimala Thakur. She's saying, how would it be if all of our information in schools, as children, as in school we are taught and given information, would just filter through us like food and be assimilated like food to operate functionally without, now I'm using my own words, clotting into an image of what I am as an owner of this information. A good student, a bad student, a prospective lawyer or whatever. Then the information is not just used to function richly, intelligently, but its main purpose becomes to become somebody with social prestige, standing among others, or acceptance by one's parents, or the fear of no acceptance by people around us because I'm nothing. I can't say what I am. Happens early in school, doesn't it? Those of us who have relationship with teachers or have been teachers or have had children or have children. It's not just the sort of assimilation like good, interesting food, a good taste of it, and then the body does the job of assimilating. We don't know nothing about it ourselves. Maybe we have studied it, we have theoretical knowledge about it. But the body does miraculous and unfathomable things with the food that is chewed and swallowed in the mouth. And it also does miraculous things with information gathered in learning. It's little children, the schools and the society is trying to grab them earlier and earlier to get them into the school, which is so sad. Because little children, if there's some safety in the environment, learn continuously, learn playfully, even practice things. Our little granddaughter taking tights off and on ad infinitum. Not the parent felt, well, get dressed, we want to go, but she wanted to take them off and on. Same with her boots. Just by herself, and a fascination with learning some skill. Maybe that she's observed and others do. Or just in itself, the fascination of sticking that foot into some elongated bag. And somehow or other, eventually it fits. And immediately pulling it off again, do it again. No one said practice stocking putting on every day 5 minutes. Probably if anybody said that, she wouldn't do it anymore. So what are we doing in interfering with this natural assimilation of information? Giving grades, pushing for faster performances. There'll be something in the next newsletter, a letter from a concerned mother over what happened to her third grader who used to not even want to stay home from school if he was sick, and now getting sick when he has to go to school because of timed math tests. Our son went through similar things in 4th grade. The stomach turning about the speed at which you have to perform. Or the day that I went to school with Ben, I think I mentioned it once. He had to write a story. We were sitting together on little chairs, big chair for him, round table, and he was writing about the zoo yesterday. And then the teacher said, 5 more minutes, class, and I'll give you a countdown. And Ben froze. He says, I can't finish this. I said, Ben, you got 5 minutes. That's not enough. And there was this paralysis setting in, that he could not operate under this pressure. And he didn't write another word. Sat there for 5 minutes. And this kind of thing crystallizes and forms, accumulates the sense of me as somebody successful, good, approved of, liked or disliked, disapproved of, high-graded, low-graded. And the importance of that waxing all the time, and the importance of what is going on in and around us, which beckons to be looked at and learned, wanes. What is important to keep alive as this me that is loved and respected, or the reverse attachment to a me that is no good, and therefore attracting attention through antics or naughty behavior. So it came up the other day when we had a discussion period on after a staff meeting, and at one point a couple of people were questioning each other about something being scary, about revealing things about ourselves. I think this is how it came about. A person said, "This is scary," and the questioner said, "What is scary? What are we afraid of?" And the response was of getting hurt. What are we afraid of? What is it getting hurt? Can one look at this? We talk about it all the time. Can one look at what it is in getting hurt that's so upsetting? What is happening? Not it shouldn't happen, I shouldn't get hurt, or I have a right to get hurt, but what's happening in this whole in this universe of hurt? To be there and find out. Well, the person who was talking there said, it's almost physical. The person said, almost physical, has to do with his body. And on questioning and listening further, the person said, it's just like jumping out of the way of a truck to protect myself. So also protecting this whole sense of me. It's physically there, the protection, or the sense of me. And later on, we're wondering whether jumping out of the way of an oncoming truck is the same as protecting oneself in the presence of someone who criticizes one or says something unfair to one or an angry word. Is jumping out of the way of a truck the same defensive device, the same protection as protecting oneself in the presence of of insult or verbal? Or we're not talking about being hit or being a stone thrown at. Verbal aggression or verbal slighting. Is it? We have to look. I'm not answering this. I have to look myself. Can't answer it for someone else. Seeing the truck coming and jumping. Why do we do that? We teach children to jump out of the way of a truck because children may not yet have any knowledge about speed and impact and danger of an oncoming car. So they're taught very early by many different means, often through physical hurt, being hit, spanked when they run into the street, to stay on the curb, not run into the street. So with this, a conditioned reflex is built up. Oncoming truck means jumping, running. So automatic, so quick that no thinking has to take place. Thinking meaning a process in time. The truck and the jumping are one thing, one instantaneous thing. And, of course, programmed into every cell of this body probably is survival. Survival of this organism with all of its sub-organisms, subsystems, survive. Is that why there is defensive escape or withdrawal in the presence of a hurting remark? Is that the same thing? Trying to survive? I must survive. I can't survive this. Unless there is defense or retroactive aggression toward the aggressor. Is there a fear of not surviving? And the same mechanisms operating to keep intact the idea of myself? Because no one is assaulting me physically. No arrow is being shot at me. And yet it feels an arrow just pierced the solar plexus. Somebody says something unkind or aggressive, unfair, or maybe sometimes not unfair, just criticizes something. I want to be hidden. I don't want to be known or criticized. I want to be there as a perfect being. Is that what I'm protecting? The idea of myself? Or is that what is being protected with these same mechanisms of, although, jumping out of the way of a truck and it's over, it's finished. It was a complete action. But defending the image it's not over. This thing is carried. What he said, what she said. I remember it when next time I meet you. This is how I'm going to meet you with this remembered grudge, or if it was kind things or nice, flattering things you said, with this remembered seeking more pleasure from you. And all taking place in the imagination, albeit physically accompanied by a lot of many movements of instruments in the orchestra. Physical orchestra. And we're questioning here whether it's possible to intelligently jump out of the way of a car, and yet in that not justifying or perpetuating, protecting and defending images of oneself. Not just protecting and defending, but constantly asserting, repairing, maintaining, aggrandizing. Which is, if one observes it, don't believe me and don't fight me, just observe it for yourself in daily life. This is what keeps us forever without peace, inwardly and outwardly, always in war or even terror. What he thinks of me as a Jew or an Arab, or a German or a South African, or a black. The examples are infinite because our categorizations of ourselves and each other are infinite. Constantly create new ones, something to identify with. So we are something. And with that, afraid and wanting and isolated from each other, albeit maybe in company of other isolated common causers, people who belong to the same group, then it's a group isolation. Does this make sense? Or has one heard it so often that it doesn't reveal itself in our moment-to-moment living? That's the danger of saying something over and over, that it remains verbal and one doesn't look. Yes, this is what is happening here. I want to be this. I want to be respected as a mother. Father, whatever. In the same discussion we had the other day, it was brought up, well, there is this life or this area or field of where there is no me, which comes up in retreat, a release from it, freedom, nothingness. But then there is this daily life of our social interaction, my life as a this or as a that, cultural life, life of hurt, like life of grief. And it sounded as though the twain couldn't meet. They were forever separate. Maybe it's not what the person meant. So it doesn't matter what the person meant. What matters right now, is this forever separate? Our life of thought and all the pains and wants and fears issuing from thoughts and thought clusters. And this life of wholeness, of leaves and trees and wind, clouds and sun, rain and water, animals and flowers, in which there's no fragmentation, no thought-created separation, no image-created clutching or grasping for eternity, for permanency. I think to answer this, one has to look, how do we live? And is it absolutely inevitable that we live our daily lives, which are lives of working for a living, for paying for the rent, children, family, clothes, transportation? Does this inevitably lead to protecting images, creating, maintaining, aggrandizing, protecting images about ourselves and each other? Because this is where the fragmentation and division comes in. Not in working simply to get the money to pay for what one needs, which can become very complicated too. The more complicated that becomes, the more one wants, the more one has to pay for and protect and store and move and so forth. But is there, even for a moment, conceivable a way of living this life of culture and society in a simple way, out of no being something, and not trying to be somebody or have one's relatives, children, or friends become something? Getting the information like food, whatever information there is, and it's marvelous to learn about the immune system or the body or the stars, and allowing that to be assimilated by this organism, to live intelligently among all other organisms which are all of the same stuff. All of the same stuff and all of the same space. because we're not just stuff, we're mostly space. Empty space with lots of energy. That's what we are, that's what this universe is, that's what deers are, and dying water lilies. Can we begin for a moment at a time to live together spaciously? Not what you are or were or should be, not what I am or was or should be. And seeing those structures operate and understanding how lethal they are, lethal to peace and wholeness. Guarding against being down on oneself for what is discovered, rather rejoicing in that things can be discovered about ourselves as human beings, sharing this earth, this universe. It is 12 o'clock now, and recently, with maybe a little bit shorter talks, we have had some time for people to ask questions. How is it? Susan, do we budget the same amount of time for talk as for discussion period with the kitchen?
Well, the kitchen is ready to serve us at
Yeah.
any time we finish
Yeah.
the talk and or discussion.
Well, there will be a discussion period tomorrow in Rochester, right?
Yes, there will be
Yeah.
a sitting beginning at 7:30 at the Friends Meeting House in Rochester, followed by a discussion at 8:30.
So maybe we'll leave it till then. Sorry I went so long.